Hello, everyone. This is Xiaolu Zhang. I'm from the Department of Information System and Cybersecurity at UTSA. This is actually my first time presenting a paper on DFRWS EU. So I'm really excited to get to share with you today about the work I did in collaboration with my colleagues, Oren, Upton, Nicole, Beebe, and Kim-Kwang, Raymond. So here, I want to say thanks to NSF and CACI for supporting this research, and also to DFRWS EU community for giving me this opportunity to present my work. Today, I'll be talking about our digital forensic research on Mirai Botnet servers. So before jumping right in, I'd like to get a brief context in regards to Mirai Botnet. Basically, I want to introduce Mirai Botnet in a few sentences, because Mirai was first found in later August 2016. All the important features of a Mirai has been well known. So the features about Mirai includes, first is an IoT malware for building a centralized controlled botnet. And second, Mirai and its variants are pretty much counted for some of the largest or most famous IoT DDoS attacks, with incredibly high peak of the denial of service traffics. And third is open source, so which is pretty much why Mirai could be spreading so fast. So there was research I remember showed that the number of the existing IoT botnets on the internet had a significant raise since Mirai was open source. So which is very bad. But the good thing is that since Mirai is open source, the source code becomes the best resource for for us to understand Mirai and its variants. So which is also what our research was based on. So basically, we had to follow the suggestions given by the author of Mirai to set up a live Mirai botnet on our local network, because we believe that this way, or this setup, could be highly possibly utilized by the most of the people who intend to abuse the source code, so that our research could be done in the circumstances as close as the real world scenario. So what this figure shows is basically the structure of the Mirai botnet we built. So in this figure, we can see that the owner or the attacker has a group of servers under his control for doing this and that. I will introduce what these servers do differently, but basically they're used for controlling or managing attacks, users, and a significant amount of IoT devices infected by the malicious executable of Mirai. But basically, a Mirai botnet could be initialized by such infected IoT device, so on which the malicious executable of Mirai is running for sure. A live malware executable will contact the CNC or control and command server proactively and constantly, so that the CNC knows a list of live bots, so that it can launch DDoS attack. Launch a DDoS attack by directly sending an attacking command to the bots. So to find the IP address of the CNC server, a bot actually needs to take an extra step, which is he needs to get the CNC server's domain name, which is hard-coded in the executable, resolved from a hard-coded DNS server. So by hard-coded, I mean the IP address of the DNS server is hard-coded and executable as well. So surprisingly, the existence of the DNS server has been somehow neglected or missed from all the existing research I found. The reason is unknown, but to the best of our knowledge, this small missing point could be significant for forensic investigators. So, which is why I want to point this out in this presentation. Once an IoT device becomes a bot, it scans for other vulnerable IoT devices and report the positive findings to a server called scan receiver. So whose IP address must be found from the DNS server as well. So um, how this scan receiver works is that he would activate another server called loading server or loader to upload the pre-built, malicious executable to the vulnerable IoT devices. So usually the scan receiver and loader are on the same machine as they were, sharing the executable IoT devices user credentials with the standard output of the machine. And besides, there's a database server unknown from the bus, which is built for storing the user credentials for the attacker to remotely log in to the CNC server's control panel. So as well as, for storing the historical commands issued by the attacker, which includes those commands for attacking. So since Mirai has been known for a couple of years, many investigations, analysis, and research have done and focused on malware analysis. In other words, these works were targeting the malicious executable of Mirai, which could be found from an infected IoT device or a honeypot. So based on these previous works, a gap was found and resolved in our research, where we considered the Mirai situation from a digital forensic investigator's perspective, in which there is no existing research or a guideline that tells the investigator what they can do if a Mirai Botnet server or even a group of servers that are involved in a previous attack were captured or could be accessed by the investigator. So, being more specific, our research was trying to find the forensic approaches that could work or that we should rely on when we try to investigate those botnet servers that were controlled by an attacker or even the script kiddie who just downloaded everything needed from GitHub. Also, we intended to uncover what evidence could be retrievable and where the evidence could be located, so on and so forth. So here's the methodology of our research. As soon as we built the internal Mirai Botnet, local Mirai Botnet, we logged on the CNC server from the terminal and launched different type of DDoS attacks several times in order to generate forensic artifacts on these servers. So then we achieved data acquisition for obtaining the file systems, RAM, and network traffic, from these servers, and then manually analyze the data. So here, instead of searching for evidence broadly, we had made a couple of prime targets, based on what evidence we believe could be significantly important for a case of IoT botnet attack. The targets include, for example, the historical record of the achieved attacks or attacking history. And second, the victim or target of the DDoS attack, or you can say the victim list. And third, the information about the affected bots, or a bot list for short. So, of course, during the investigation, we ended up with some additional findings, but these three are what we're looking for primarily. And then finally, we encapsulate our findings into a roadmap. With this roadmap, an investigator can start a forensic analysis from any of these 5 servers. The roadmap could indicate the path from a data entity to the prime evidence we were looking for. An entity here could be, for example, a network packet, an executable file, or a live process in RAM, or something else that could be extracted from the data images. And here is the roadmap. So due to the result of our case study, the CNC server and the database server should be considered the first priority during Mirai server forensics, because it's almost guaranteed to find the integrated bot list from the live memory of the CNC process. And the attack history from the database. Also, since we found that these two servers store the user credentials one another, meaning that if a CMC server of a Mirai botnet is captured, it's highly possible that the investigator is able to recover the user credentials and IP address of the database server. So, by which the investigator could dump the entire Mirai database remotely. So, I mean, starting from here, I'm gonna talk about the key evidence we found from the CNC server and the database server. So primarily, investigators could expect to find user credentials of the database and the bot list from the CNC server. So the user credentials could be recovered, very easily if the source code files of the CNC service, hasn't been removed since they were compiled. So all we need to do is to just find the source code file, which is main.go at this path, which is supposed to handle the database connection. From this main.go, we can definitely recover the IP address, user credentials, and the name of the database. But if the source code isn't available, the second option could be the executable file of the CNC, which one can retrieve from hard disk or memory because the information we're looking for is hard coded. Here, by reverse engineering the CNC's executable, we proposed the quickest way to find such evidence. Basically, like the screenshot shows, what we need to do is to locate where the main.new database function is called. And because the address of the evidence we're looking for is supposed to be, passed to this main.new database function as arguments, if we find where the function is called, we're able to find the hard-coded evidence like these. Except the user credentials of the database server, the bot list is something unique that we have recovered from the CNC server. Because the CNC server is pretty much the only server where we can recover a reliable bot list. By reliable here, I mean the list should include all the bots that are alive at the moment. The list is captured. Based off Mirai's original design, CNC server only contact to the bots passively, meaning that the bots would contact the CNC server constantly and being added or removed from the queue that stores the live bots in CNC's memory. So in other words, the memory space of CNC is pretty much the only place we can find such evidence. So since CNC was written in Golan, although Mirai source code is helpful, we still have to map the data structure, written in Golan to a low-level data structure in memory, which is, to the best of our knowledge, not documented anywhere. By far the paper was written. So during the proposed process for extracting the bot list, the most challenging part was how to locate the 32 byte bot data structure from CNC memory dump. The bot data structure is supposed to store the connection of the bot. So to deal with it, we proposed that the investigator could first find the starting address of the net.connection function by just broadly searching the function's machine code as a signature from the memory. And then because the starting address of the net.connection function is considered the second member of the bot data structure, which is surrounded by UID, the UID field, and which is always a linear number, and also a version field, which is usually assigned with value 1, referring to IPv4. Forensic investigators can utilize the net.connections starting address for a keyword search in order to locate the 32-byte bus structure in the memory. So after the 32-byte data structure is located, going through a couple of references, as the screenshot shows, the IP address of the bus could be extracted. Comparing with CNC server, the investigation on database server was more straightforward. So basically, there was a history table for storing the historical commands issued on the CNC, and a user table for storing, the CNC login credentials. In our case study, we had given an example how to extract the tables from the database remotely by using the user credentials recovered from the CNC server. So since the database server is programmatically only known by the CNC server in the Mirai Botnet, we argue that without capturing CNC, the database server couldn't be found. However, different than the CNC or database server, the bot list recovered from the receiver and loader came from the network packets and standard output stream. Due to how the server works, technically these records are not infected IoT devices, but the vulnerable IoT devices. Although some of them, most of them should have turned into infected IoT devices. Also, there's another highly possible issue, which is the recovered bot list is incomplete, as the record could be lost very easily whenever the server reboots. Indeed, a malicious executable must hardcode the IP address of the DNS server. Therefore, we argue that the malicious executable can be utilized as a probe in this botnet for future monitoring the upcoming attacks issued by the CNC server, in order to collect more evidence and so on and so forth. But nothing is guaranteed, or like the solid evidence we can find from the CNC or database server. The figure here is an example of a vulnerable IoT's IP address, username, and password, which we recovered from the memory dump of the standard output stream. So comparing to the aforementioned servers, the only useful data on the DNS server and the attacker's terminal is from the DNS query log and the terminal's network packets. So which could be examined, for extracting the information of the bus and the history attack commands, respectively. However, because first, the history attack commands is only cached in memory. And second, it's very difficult to monitor the network traffic sending back and forth between the terminal and the CNC. And third, anyone can send a request to the DNS server theoretically. So based off all these reasons, the DNS server and the attacker's remote terminal are considered the lowest prioritized, from a forensic investigator's perspective. So in this figure, the recovered DNS log shows that device 192.168.4.2 looks like a bot, looks like, because theoretically everyone can send a DNS request to this DNS server. And the bot requested the IP address of the CNC server and the scan receipt. All right, in a quick summary, this research intended to fill the gap where no existing study has performed a digital forensic analysis on IoT botnet servers. It also provides, findings technically useful to forensic investigators, not only from the perspective of what data could be obtained, but also important information about which device they should target for acquisition and investigation to obtain the most investigatively useful information. We consider that this research was limited to the standard original Mirai botnet setup. Our future work is to eliminate the impacts caused by the significant customization of Mirai and try to extend the knowledge gained from Mirai to another open source or closed source IoT botnet families. Okay, from here, I want to open it up for questions. Thank you.